good, which is great. So calcium's out of the equation. We've got what they magnesium, potassium. So then we do potassium, which is a big suspect. In my opinion, they can use quite a lot of it. And so we do top leaf, bottom leaf, and they need to be no different, no more than 10% variation. And the top leaf was, I can't quite read that, what was it? I'm got glasses on.
2100.
2100, and the bottom leaf was 1400. Well, you can see that's more than 10%, and what you're seeing there is a potassium deficiency. And because it's vigorous and there's a lot of other good things happening with that Brix, you need more potassium, and you haven't got it sort of coming through more pronounced in that context. And so it's like with to better block, how come it's worse? Well, yeah, you need potassium to drive that bigger growth in that scenario, and potassium's the mineral missing there. So you just solved that. I mean, it could be magnesium as well, but it could be, because you haven't access to the one you don't have a cross-reference for. But, you know, what you do is correct the potassium and then watch the sap pH come up, and if it didn't go right up there, then so maybe I should put a little bit of max sulfate with that, you know, which you could actually do the two together very easily if you chose, and I probably would. Just put a little bit of max sulfate, and then what you lose is 30 cents a kilo or something, to cover both of those two. So the other block was a lower Brix of 7.5, and so this is the less vigorous block. Sap pH is 6.2, so it's kind of somewhere around the mark, but it hasn't got the vigor and it hasn't got the requirement for potassium, and you would assume that, oh, so what was the top leaf, bottom leaf for that one?
5,990.
So 5,000 at the top, yeah, 990 at the bottom.
Yeah, so yeah, that's so basically you're going to leave potassium's the big one there.
One thing that I was telling them is potassium is a nutrient that usually it's within, in between the clay particles. So when you get a situation like that where the soil is saturated with water, these clay particles, they just get compressed and the potassium get less available. So in a situation where the bottom block has got more saturation because it's not on the swale, then you got less potassium availability, whereas on the top area it's still deficient, but it's got more air, so it's more friable soil there, so they can have more access to potassium as well. So this is one other thing that can differentiate what's the reason why the deficiency is much higher on the poor area, and like that.
Wait until it dried out before you run.
Well, that's what I mentioned. If you want to get a better picture, then you probably wait a little bit till it dries up. It's not a perfect condition now.
So what you would do ideally when it does dry, if that position retains it, is exactly right what Marco's saying, that can happen with clay platings in those kind of soils, and this is one of those soils, so that's possible. Then you'd come in with that 8 kilos of hot sulfate, which you're allowed to do in organics with a bit of fulvic acid, and I'll put a little bit of mag sulfate in there as well.
So what was that process like? For the first one, we checked the calcium. So we're going to check the calcium with our Brix meter again. Yeah. On the second test there. Yeah. Right. So the calcium's fine. Yeah. And then what's our what do we check? What are we going to check for next?
You do a top leaf, bottom leaf for potassium, and you want no more than 10% variation between those two positions.
But this is the anions now that we're checking.
No, this is cation still.
Oh, so even for the high pH, we're still checking for the cation.
No, that's not high pH. It's only 5.8.
No, it's the 7.4, the second one.
No, it's 6.2. 6.2.
Yeah, it wasn't 7.4.
It was 7.5 Brix, wasn't.
7.5 was a Brix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 7.5 Brix versus 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens if it's a high pH then?
And what you see, not always, but what you usually see in a high pH, what you're looking at is kind of a seesaw basically, where you've got the alkaline minerals and it's the acid-alkaline balance, and it's very similar to the scenario if you're acidic, but it's kind of different. So it's about this seesaw. Often it can be high nitrates, so it's an anion, it's nitrates, phosphorus and sulfur, so it's a balance of those three.
When it's high.
Yeah, when it's high. And usually it's too much nitrates, because of course that does dilute everything and call in insects, and that's why there's more likely to be an insect pressure. But it can also be a deficiency of sulfur, and again it's quite hard because you haven't got a cross-referencing, but it can be a deficiency of sulfur, and of course sulfur is required for all of the protective compounds the plant uses to protect itself. That's why, and including making amino acids to drive protein, 2 of the amino acids are sulfur deficient. So a lack of sulfur is going to be more insects because you've got no defense system. So it can be that, and phosphorus similarly is about it's about defense. It's about the whole quality of the plant.
So how are we trying to decide what
it's hard to know which one it is for the top end. If you've got insect pressure, you know, you really haven't got that way that you can cross-reference and decide, oh, it's not calcium because I checked this and it's whatever. So you can look at your soil test, you can look at, you know, conventional leg test will then tell you, but you know, it's very often high nitrates in the plant that will give you the insect pressure and the high sap pH.
So that was another thing too, Graeme. I dug them out the other day before it rained. They got nodules on them, but they're the same colour as your skin. There's no blood in them, there's no red in them. Yeah. They're there, but they've got no leg hemoglobin.
Yeah, so we saw this little touch of boron deficiency. We've got a boron to have leg hemoglobin as it's called. And we can also see that touch of sulfur deficiency on the top there.
So
those are the suspects.
You can put them all in?
Well, it depends within your, you can, but within your scenario, it's just a case of what you're allowed to do, you know. I mean, yeah.
Elemental sulfur.
Yeah, but I mean, it's foliage, you can't polish both elemental sulfur. That's just, you know, you could use something like ammonium sulfate or something, or probably not. Potassium sulfate, oh yeah, you can, you've got potassium sulfate, so you can do that, yeah. Yeah, so you've covered that.
That wouldn't antagonise it, it wouldn't antagonise the, no, fulvic would be fine.
Yeah, fulvic's good with that.
We don't need calcium, but we've done a bit of magnesium.
No, you definitely don't need calcium in there.
A bit of magnesium.
I always put a little bit of mag sulfate in it, sure.
Did you go a bit molly then?
Yeah, well, you've already done some molly, haven't you?
I just silicated it.
Yeah. I mean, a little tiny smattering would be worth considering to get that red happening. And boron's the other one. And here you can put boron with those.